Imagine dying at 32 years old, sick, feverish, thousands of miles from home, and somehow, in those final desperate months, producing mathematics so advanced that the world's greatest experts wouldn't fully understand it for another 50 years. Now imagine that work disappearing, forgotten, buried in a dusty box inside one of England's most prestigious libraries, unseen, unread, untouched for over half a century. In 1976, a mathematician opened that box. What he found inside didn't just shock the academic world. It rewrote everything we thought we knew about the limits of human genius. The pages weren't organized. There were no explanations, no proofs, just hundreds of impossible formulas, written in a dying man's trembling hand, formulas that somehow turned out to be almost entirely correct. This is the story of Srinivasa Ramanujan's lost notebook. And trust me, you are not ready for what was written inside. The year is 1920. In a small house in Madras, India, the city we now call Chennai, a young man lies on his deathbed. He is 32 years old. His body is failing him, ravaged by illness that doctors have spent years misdiagnosing. He has no formal university degree. He grew up in poverty in the temple town of Kumbakonam in South India, teaching himself mathematics from borrowed textbooks and the whispered inspirations he claimed came to him in dreams. His name is Srinivasa Ramanujan, and despite everything, the fever, the pain, the isolation, he is still writing mathematics. Not simple mathematics, not the kind taught in classrooms or textbooks. He is writing formulas that belong to a future that hasn't arrived yet. Identities involving infinite series, mysterious functions, patterns hidden so deep inside numbers that even the world's leading mathematicians would scratch their heads for decades trying to figure out how he got there. On April 26, 1920, Ramanujan dies. His papers are gathered by his grieving family and eventually sent to Cambridge, England, to his mentor, the legendary British mathematician G.H. Hardy. Hardy examines some of them. Another mathematician named G.N. Watson studies portions too, but the full collection? It gets quietly transferred to a box. That box gets placed on a shelf inside the Wren Library at Trinity College, Cambridge. And there it sits, silent, waiting for 56 years. Here's where the story gets truly haunting. G.H. Hardy, the man who had famously called Ramanujan a once-in-a-century genius, the man who brought him from India to Cambridge, never fully processed everything Ramanujan left behind. Watson studied select pieces but never published the complete contents. When Watson himself died in 1965, the remaining papers were simply archived and largely forgotten. Think about what that means. The final mathematical output of arguably the greatest self-taught genius in human history, written during the most extraordinary creative burst of his life, was sitting in a cardboard box that nobody was seriously examining. And here's the deeper problem. Ramanujan never explained his work, ever. He didn't write proofs. He didn't show his working. He simply wrote down the answers, these breathtaking, intricate formulas, as if they were obvious, as if he had seen them somewhere and was simply transcribing them. Hardy once said that Ramanujan's results were so strange, so unexpected, that they had to be true because nobody could have had the imagination to simply invent them. But without proofs, how could the mathematical world verify them? How could they build upon them? How could they even begin to understand how Ramanujan's mind worked? The box in the Wren Library represented a locked vault. Inside was potentially revolutionary mathematics. But the key, the explanation, the reasoning, the how, existed only inside a mind. That had been gone for over 50 years. The clock had already been ticking, and almost nobody knew it. Spring 1976. George Andrews, a mathematician from Pennsylvania State University, travels to Cambridge. He is researching the work of G.M. Watson and is granted access to the Wren Library's collection of Watson's papers. He opens a box. Inside are approximately 138 loose, unorganized pages covered in Ramanujan's unmistakable handwriting. No titles, no dates, no chapter headings, just column after column of densely packed formulas, hundreds of mathematical statements involving what are called Mach theta functions, Q-series modular forms, and other structures that sit at the absolute frontier of number theory. Andrew stares at these pages, and his hands begin to tremble, because he recognizes what he is looking at. He understands immediately, viscerally, that these are not random scribblings. These are results. Finished, deliberate, sophisticated results. Written by a man who was, by all accounts, barely able to lift himself from his bed during those final months. The sheer density of the work is staggering. Page after page of mathematics that would take professional researchers years to fully verify. And yet here it all was, produced in perhaps Ramanujan's last few hundred days of life in a small house in Madras, while his body was shutting down around him. Andrews described the experience later as one of the most electrifying moments of his mathematical career. He called the collection a lost notebook, not a formal bound volume, but the name stuck immediately, because that is precisely what it felt like. Something lost, something miraculous, something found. Andrews brought the discovery to the world's attention, and then did something remarkable. He dedicated his life to understanding it. Together with mathematician Bruce C. Bart of the University of Illinois, Andrews embarked on one of the most extraordinary scholarly projects in modern mathematical history. For over 4 decades, the two men systematically worked through every formula, every identity, every cryptic statement Ramanujan had left on those 138 pages. They had to prove what Ramanujan had simply written as fact. Imagine that. 2 brilliant professional mathematicians with decades of combined experience, with access to every modern mathematical tool available, spending 40 years catching up to what one dying, largely self-taught man wrote in his final months with almost nothing. The results were staggering. Nearly every single formula Ramanujan wrote turned out to be correct. Not approximately correct, not partially correct, correct. Formulas involving Mach theta functions, mathematical structures so complex and nuanced that the mathematical world didn't even fully define them until 2002. Ramanujan had been working with them intuitively in 1919. He had somehow seen the shape of an entire mathematical landscape that wouldn't be formally mapped for another 80 years. Andrews and Berndt published their findings in a 5-volume series, Ramanujan's Lost Notebook and Other Unpublished Papers, released between 2005 and 2018. The series confirmed what Andrews had felt the moment he opened that dusty box in Cambridge. The mathematical world had been holding its breath for half a century without knowing it. Today, the formulas contained in Ramanujan's Lost Notebook ripple across multiple fields of modern science: string theory, black hole physics, cryptography, computer science, combinatorics, number theory at its deepest levels. Researchers continue to discover new connections between Ramanujan's work and problems at the cutting edge of mathematics and theoretical physics. And here is the lesson that stops me cold every time I think about this story. Ramanujan didn't have a supercomputer. He didn't have a university salary or a prestigious research team. He had paper, ink, and a mind that seemed to operate on a frequency nobody else could quite tune into. He came from a small town in South India, was largely ignored by the academic establishment for years, scraped together enough confidence to write a letter to a stranger named G.H. Hardy, and changed mathematics forever. The Lost Notebook teaches us something profound about the nature of genius and time. Some ideas are so far ahead of their moment that the world simply isn't ready for them. They have to wait, sitting patiently in a box on a library shelf until the right person opens the lid. Ramanujan's greatest work was hidden for half a century. Imagine what else might still be waiting to be found. That is the incredible, goosebumps-worthy story of Ramanujan's Lost Notebook, one of the most astonishing mathematical discoveries of the 20th century, found in a dusty box by a man who simply knew what he was looking at. Now I want to hear from you. Here's the question I keep thinking about. If Ramanujan could produce mathematics of that depth and originality with almost no resources and no formal support, what does that tell us about the potential locked inside human minds that never get the opportunity he eventually received? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I genuinely read every single one. If this story gave you chills, the way it gives me chills, hit that like button right now. It genuinely helps more people discover these incredible hidden stories from history. And subscribe if you want more, because next time we will be exploring and presenting interesting and real events, so stay tuned. Trust me, you don't want to miss that one.